Hey, so today we're going to do a little instructional video on the FLIR Ex cameras, the E4, 5, 6, and 8. So for now, roll the intro. Okay, here we are today. We're going to do a little unboxing and tell you a little bit about the FLIR E6 thermal imaging cameras. First off, I want to tell you about the fact that these cameras are shipped in just a regular brown box. Inside the box is the hard shell Pelican type case. Come in this retail sleeve like you would find if the camera was being sold in a store. So we can just remove that. Then you get your FLIR Pelican case. FLIR actually makes the case for these cameras in-house. So then you flip the little switches. We'll flip her around here and show you the camera. Comes in the case just like that. You have your camera and you have a little box of documentation and accessories. This particular EX series camera is an E6 camera. Set our case off to the side, set our camera down, and I'll show you a little bit about what comes in the box. When you first open the box, you get a thank you from the president of, actually general manager of the instruments division. You also get a reminder to register your camera to extend the warranty to 2 years. Then you get the calibration certificate. And you get a little quick start guide. This isn't the full manual. This is just a small quick start guide to show you a little bit of about the camera and how to get your camera started and going. Then inside the box is a USB mini. It's a mini that is actually used to charge the camera. So that USB is where you would plug in to charge the camera. Also where you would pull images off of the camera. And then you get the actual charging cord. So this one is a micro USB to regular USB that you can either plug into like a phone charger or into your computer. And then you also get a charging cable, USB mini, in a regular 120 outlet with a bunch of different connections for if you are overseas, not in the United States. So that's everything that comes with the camera. We will go through the startup of the camera and show you how to get going with it. Okay, so here we have the E6 camera itself, and we'll give you a little rundown of the camera. When we look at the front of the camera, here we have a little switch, and when we pull on that switch, we can open the camera, and it brings us out our lens and the infrared lens, and then the digital camera. So we have the infrared camera, the digital camera lenses, and then when you close it, it closes down that lens so that it's protected. Also on the front of the camera is the trigger button for saving images. And then if we run down to the end of the camera, there is the battery. And the battery has two little detents with lines on them. And when we squeeze in those two indented areas, it pushes in the holders for the battery. And it slides right into that. So the battery setup is made so that you can only put it in one way and only take it out one way. So then you just push it back in there. And then we'll go around to the back side of the camera. On the back side of the camera, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, and kind of a 5th button around. This button is your start button. So when you press and hold that down, the camera will begin its startup phase. And then the other buttons are your back arrow, your play button to show what images you have on your card, and then here you have a joystick. The center of it is like pressing enter, and then around the outside you have right, left, up, and down. So whenever you start this camera, it is going to go through a startup process where the camera will run through a startup procedure, do a test, all in the background, and as a line moves across, eventually the image will begin to show up. So if we open up our lens cover, we can see the image that we're getting from this camera. And if we do something like face it over on my dogs, then you can actually see them in the image. Now, one aspect that I want to point out right away is if you notice in this infrared image, you can actually see the wood grain in this table. The reason that is possible is because of the digital camera. It overlays on top of the infrared image in what's called an MSX function, which takes the highlights of your digital image and overlays it on top of your infrared image. So initially when you first start up your camera, it will come in Celsius. You can press the center of the button to bring up the menus across the bottom, and then use the left part of the joystick to go over to settings. And as you move through each one of those areas, it will tell you, it will tell you what that particular setting does in the camera. So we'll go over to settings and I'll step through and show you what the different settings are. So we'll also go back and I'll show you how we change that from Celsius to Fahrenheit. So we'll press this back arrow. It'll take us back one menu screen. And then we can go down here, cycle down to device settings. And when we're on device settings, we can go into the first option is language, units, and time. So then we can go to that. We can go down and we can set our temperature to Fahrenheit or Celsius. And we can set our distances from meters to feet, if that so is what you want to do. The other thing we can go through and do is set the time zone for where you live and the time and date. I'm going to set it at -6 for right now. Today is the 5th, and our time is 1954. You can also set it whether you want it to be AM, PM, or if you want to set it for 24 hour. And if you notice here, I have my date format of year, month, day, and 24 hour. We will change that to 12 hour. And that's all of our unit setups. So then we can go back. And then we can go back again. And we'll go through each of these. So now if we go back into our parameters, now it's Fahrenheit and feet. So again, under the distance area, if we are going to be 2 feet, 3 feet, 4 feet away from our target, we want the MSX to line up better. So for example, over there when we were looking at our dogs, they are probably about 8 feet away from us. So that's where we would set that particular parameter within the camera. We can go back and we'll go down to save options. And the big thing under the save options is whether you want to save a separate JPEG image. So when you have the MSX function on, you're going to get a digital image and an infrared image. And then when you set the JPEG to on, it's going to also save you a digital image with your infrared image. Camera range settings. So there's two camera range settings, -4 to 482 degrees and 50 to 1022. Then when we go on our device settings, there are a number of things. There's our language and units that we talked about. There's a Wi-Fi setting. So the Wi-Fi setting, when it is turned on share, allows us to connect directly to iPhone, iPad devices to be able to wirelessly save images back and forth between the two. We will show that later on. If you connect to a network, then you can share with Android devices. So with Android devices, you can't do what's called an ad hoc connection. So you have to go through and share through the network. Both devices, the camera and the Android tablet or Android phone, have to be on the same network as the camera. So we'll leave that off for a little bit. We'll come back to that later. Then we're going to go down to the reset options. So if I set up the camera and I didn't like how it set it up, somebody else got a hold of it and they mess it up, we can reset our camera to factory settings. We can reset it back to default mode of the camera, which means that our Celsius is going to change back, meters are going to change back. It's going to change our time back to the 0 time zone. If we go down here to delete all images, if we have any images on our card, that's how we would delete to get rid of those. Okay, we'll go back to the auto power off. It's set for 20 minutes. So and we can change it to off 5 or 20 minutes. I usually set my cameras to off, but we won't with this one. The other thing I'm going to note is you can go into these types of menus by either pressing the right, you can go out by pressing the left, or you can press enter, and then to go back out, you can press the back arrow. Okay, then next is the display intensity. So when you go into that, you see we have a high, medium, low. So for example, you would want to use the low if you were using this at night or in a dark setting. If you were scanning a rooftop or something where you had to be outside at night, you'd probably want to use the low so it's just not, so the display isn't so intense. If you're using it in the daytime outside, you would probably want to go to the high setting. Demonstration mode. I don't know why you would ever want to do these demonstration modes. You can look in the manual for that. I don't think you ever, it just does a demo for how the camera works. Camera information. So this tells you what the serial number is of the camera, your part number, your software, how much storage space is left, the type of lens, and the percentage of battery that is left. And then regulatory, this is just your information about, just all about the camera. So that's all the display setups under the display settings for the camera. Okay, so now the basic operations of the camera. The other menu options are image mode. Remember, our MSX is set up right now. If we change to only thermal, we can see that our image doesn't look as sharp because now we're only seeing the thermal. We're not seeing the digital highlights on the image. If we go in our image mode again and do picture in picture, then we get some digital and some infrared in the middle. Sometimes this could be effective if you're looking, showing something to a customer or to a boss or somebody who doesn't understand what an infrared image looks like. But overall, as you can see, there's not very much of space of the infrared to be able to see what you're looking at. So it's not all that terribly. Then there's the thermal blending, and you can put how much of it is infrared, 40%, 20%, 30%, etc., etc. And then we're going to go back out of that. Then we have our digital camera. So let's go back to our MSX. Here is our setting for that MSX lineup. The other setting was your distance to target for your emissivity and your reflected temperature. Helps with the compensation for the camera for getting accurate temperature readings. And this is the lineup for using the MSX function to make it line up better. So it gives you 7, 10 foot, 7 foot, 5 foot, 3 foot, 2 foot, 1 foot. And if you notice, each time I do that, notice how the lineup of the digital on, see now we're greater than, everything lines up really well with that cabinet that's over there in the hallway. But if we look at our tabletop here, we can notice that there's a little bit of infrared outside of where our digital highlights show. Okay, so then when we go beyond that, we go to measurement modes. There are basically 3 types of measurements modes that we can have on the camera, and a no measurement. So if we went all the way to the right, it would be no measurement on the screen. If we choose the blue, it's a cold spot. So it gives us a square in the center of the screen, and then it finds the coldest temperature within that square. So as we move our camera, it searches out the coldest spot in that image. The next one would be the hot spot. So now our camera is going to search for and find the hottest temperature within our infrared reading. And then the next one is the center spot. So then it will read the temperature within that crosshair. But if we have a situation where we are wanting to get a highest temperature, the hot spot square is our best option. I'm going to turn that all the way off for now. Then we're going to go in and we're going to talk about our different temperature color palettes. Here we have iron, we have rainbow, we have a gray, and then we have a below alarm. So what our below alarm is going to do is everything below 68 degrees, it's going to turn blue. So that allows us to do some things if we're looking within a building or in a facility to be able to see cold areas if we're doing a building type inspection. When we choose that, we can then move that temperature up and down by using our up and down of our arrow. So if we move it down more, it'll only show those limited areas below 63. And in the same respect, we have a above. So now it's going to show us all the temperature areas above 72 degrees. And again, we can move that up or down accordingly. For the most part, the iron gives you the best contrast, image contrast, and also thermal contrast. The rainbow, I think, gives you the greatest temperature differential, temperature contrast. So if you're looking, you can see small temperature differentials very, very quick and easy with that color palette. Okay, then our last section is the temperature scale. So we can lock our temperature scale in, and then we can choose if we want to move the bottom of it, our temperature scale, up or down, if we want to use the top, or we want to use both. So then what we're doing is we're moving the middle. So if we have a 10-degree difference between our top and our bottom, we can move that and just keep it going up and down, and it's going to keep that same temperature difference between our high temperature and our low temperature, and it's just going to move it up and down. And then we can go back to our auto scale, where as we move, our temperature scale changes depending on what it is that we're looking at. So those are pretty much the basic operations of the camera. The other thing is, so if we're going to look at an image and we want to save that to be able to show where there's some air infiltration, we can save that image, and if you notice, it saves our digital and our infrared together. Then we can press the play button and we can bring that image back up. And if you notice, because we turned on save a separate digital image, we get our infrared image that also has a digital embedded in behind it, which gives us those highlights. So if we bring that image up, we can see here that we have all the digital highlights of the other areas, all that grain, all that texture of the couch that is there as well. And then we also get our regular digital image attached to that. And then we can have a separate digital image. So if we wanted to work with just the infrared image in the reporter software, and then we also wanted to work with the digital image within the software, we would have to go through and set that up in that manner to be able to do that. And then we could work with the infrared image separate from the digital image, where if we had just one of those, we would have to go into the software, and if we wanted the digital image, we'd have to export the digital image out, and it just sometimes leads to more work than is necessary. So that's pretty much the basic operations of the camera. I will now show you the more advanced operation of the Wi-Fi transfer between the infrared image and an iPad. Now I'm going to show you how to set up the Wi-Fi function within the camera. We're going to set the camera here. I'm going to go to our device settings, go up to Wi-Fi, and we're going to tell the camera to share. I'm going to check my settings. Yeah, it doesn't show that I need a password. I'm going to set this up so that I can see what I'm doing here. Then on my iPad, I'm going to go to my Wi-Fi. I'm going to set up my other networks. I'm going to watch for the IR camera to show up. Okay, so now our IR camera has shown up. So we're going, it says it doesn't connect it to the internet. We're not caring about that. We just want to be able to connect to our camera. So now it's going through connecting. And then I can go into my infrared FLIR Tools app. When I bring up my FLIR Tools app, I can go, here it says instruments. So when I go into it and I connect this area, little down arrow area here, I can select that and go into instruments. And then it says allow Bluetooth to turn on. Okay, here I've found it. So what our E6 camera does is it allows us to import images. And remember, I had one image that we had taken on there, and there it's selected to it, and now it's brought that image into my import under number 23. So then once I'm in here, I can go through and I can work with this, and I can change my color palettes. I can also go to iron. I can then also add temperatures. So I wanted to add a square and a little temperature area. So our square, I can resize my square. And then up here in the top left corner of the image, it gives us the temperature readings. So remember how I was showing you, if we go to just an infrared image, it takes away all that highlight that was in that infrared with the digital overlay, the MSX function. If I went to just the digital, so if I didn't have, the only thing that it does when I go to that digital, it still has all of my infrared readings on there, which is kind of cool. But it doesn't give you the gradient as to what is happening within that thermal image. So that's why you want a separate digital image. I can go to that and say save that image. Then I have a separate digital and infrared image, and it saved all my temperature measurements that I added to it. So that's the more advanced function that we can use with this infrared camera, and using our infrared images to transfer them quickly. They can then email or analyze the image more. The one thing I will note with this camera format is once we save an image, if you'll notice, there is nothing we can do with that. We can look at the information about how the image was taken, but we can't go in and make any adjustments. We have to go to the software to be able to make adjustments to an infrared image that's saved. That's your basics of the EX Series E6 camera. Thank you so much for joining us, and we thank you for being a part of FLIR and a part of the Utter Precision family. Hey, thanks for joining us for that. And if you want to know more about the Utter Precision services and tools, you can go to the utterprecision.com. Till next time, be utterly awesome.